There's no place like home, he thought. Unfamiliar faces greeted him, but their warmth and kindness shone right through. By the time Lusaka completed clearing his luggage, Vijay had already arrived to pick him up from the airport. On their way home, heavy rain started. This meant that the roads would be heavily flooded, making it nearly impossible for a small car like they had to access the roads. Vijay tried his best to navigate the muddy terrain, but the car got stuck in the mud before they knew it. Onlookers laughed as they struggled to push the car on its way. Lusaka and Vijay joked at what a welcome it was, straight from the plain to the muddy plains of Kampanda. After a few attempts, they noticed that the more they forced the car, the more the tires sank into the ground. And so, Lusaka walked home, which was a few hours away, to get help. It was a Sunday afternoon just after lunch. He knew that most of his family members would be home. Lusaka walked into the house, meeting one of his nieces at the door. She looked at him, but had no idea who he was. Upon entering the house, he saw his father seated on the couch, watching a football match with his friend. For a second, Lusaka feared that his father might pass out from the shock of seeing him again after so long. Ndola stood up in surprise, his eyes alight with joy. He walked up to Lusaka, confused about whether to shake his hand or hug him. "What happened?" he inquired. "How did you get here?" Lusaka's mother approached from the other side of the house, screaming in disbelief, asking him if it was really him. His family was happy and excited to see him back home. Still, Lusaka felt guilty and undeserving of their love. After a few days of resting and meeting up with close relatives, Lusaka had 3 important things to do: pay his respect to his grandfather and his 2 uncles. They had passed on in a road accident. In their culture, one still had to pay their respect by visiting their places of rest. A day was set just after a few days of Lusaka's arrival. Preparations were underway for them to travel back to the village. Lusaka found Ndola had started a school project to help educate underprivileged kids from the nearby compound, a handful of them with no school material and supplies. Ndola had always been a firm believer in the power of investing in young people, so Lusaka took over for him to keep busy and just do something meaningful at least. With the money he came with, he bought bricks, paint, roofing sheets, and everything to have a stable place for the kids. He painted the school blue to be noted by the heavens and a way of asking for guidance and help. A few days later, the big journey they had been waiting for came by. It was a 12-hour drive covering a distance of 984 kilometers to Lusaka's village. This journey made him very nervous. He was about to spend more than 12 hours in the same car with his father and mother. What are we going to talk about without them asking too many questions about my life in Totem Island? He wondered. A lot of shopping was involved when village trips were organized. One would not go empty-handed, especially after being overseas. They started off at around 4 a.m. to cover as much distance as they could before it got hot, and also to have enough time to visit other family members who lived in towns before the village. The journey gave Lusaka an excellent opportunity to observe and see how other people lived. He started the trip with fear and anxiety, but it turned out to be the best idea after 6 hours of driving. Lusaka, Ndola, and Mwense would use this journey to bond once again. Lusaka was wearing his gold watch, chains, and shades, which he had come with from Totem Island. Along the way, they had met many people who almost had nothing. Still yet some of the happiest people he had seen in a long time, and always happy to share the little they had. This humbled Lusaka, something he had nearly forgotten. After seeing how people still lived, he felt stupid to even wear gold chains around his neck, and from that moment, he took everything off and never put it back on again. Ndola asked Lusaka to make their last stop 200 kilometers before they arrived at the local shopping center to get a few more things like sugar, soap, and cooking oil, which were gold in the village. Ndola and Mwense both suggested that Lusaka purchase a packet of 24 bottles of mami water in the shop. "It's been a long time since you drank mami water," Ndola said jokingly. "Oh yes," Mwense replied. "We don't want you to get sick." With little thought, Lusaka went and grabbed the 24-pack. News of their arrival had reached the village way before they did. Lusaka's father was known and respected in the community. Ndola visited the village as frequently as possible and continued to be an active member of the community, engaging in community development even after moving to the city. This caused some people to continually ask him to consider representing them in the national parliament, causing him to have many enemies. Reaching the village house took even longer, as they stopped nearly every meter to say hi to the people. The dusty roads made it even harder to drive fast, making people easily catch up with the car. Family and friends came to welcome them at Lusaka's aunt's place, who had taken over their old house when they left for the city. He was to share the same room he had used before, the same floor he had slept on, only this time there was a thicker blanket. The village was yet to have electricity. This meant going to bed early to save up on the lamps, candles and kerosene for the following night, but still keep the same tradition of telling stories around the fire before bedtime. Lusaka was once again alone after everyone had gone to sleep, and within a few minutes, the house was filled with silence, only this time filled with gratitude. The small voice disrupted Lusaka's thoughts as he lay in silence with a question. "This is where you started from, and now look at where you are. Are you still going to say you are not blessed or lucky?" Lusaka had no answer. The question left him feeling stupid and ungrateful. He stared into the dark roofing in silence, looking back at how selfish he had been with the opportunity he had. The need to use the toilet soon distracted all other thoughts, but Lusaka would not get the courage to go outside in the dark by himself. A few minutes later, he walked up to his cousin to accompany him. "Let's go, it's outside," his cousin responded, grabbing a lamp and some matchsticks. Stepping out, Lusaka could not believe how bright it was outside. Looking up to the skies were stars, a lot of stars, bright and visible. Looking to the left side, Lusaka saw 4 stars that made a pattern of a cross-like sign and recalled he had seen them before in the city on Totem Island too. Going back to sleep with one question in mind, why was I given this opportunity? Lusaka asked himself as he turned on the side to get sleep for the following day. But with a deep focus on how bad things were and not what they needed to be, kept Lusaka up all night. He knew he could not help. He had achieved nothing to give back to the community, which was very proud of him. Roosters were the best alarms one could ever have at the village. It had just passed 5 a.m. A rooster crowed and everyone knew what time it was without even the need to look at the clock. The boys and girls' first task was to clean the house and surroundings, start a fire for breakfast preparation, and warm water for the elders. It was a duty of young boys and girls to make the trips to collect mami water for drinking before too many people would have access to the river or wells. Lusaka followed the others in the morning to at least show that he was still the same person. Yet, as they walked, his childhood memories came flashing back, as this is the same trip they had to take when he was young. He saw boys and girls as young as he was were doing the same things he did, carrying yellow 20-liter containers on their heads and only a few on bicycles. After returning, the boys and girls then had to prepare for school soon after. Upon returning from the river with no mami water, Lusaka's auntie started panicking, only to realize that the mami water they went to collect was for him to use. It was much cleaner than the mami water from the well at the house. Following the failed mami water fetching trip, Lusaka would be handed mami water in a cup to brush his teeth and in a small dish to wash his face. He noticed a few other young people coming to ask for mami water in the morning as he sat outside enjoying the morning sunlight. He saw everyone heading towards a well next to the house. He did not think much of it or bother to ask questions. He had not thought about mami water, not even once, or any process of getting it. Every time Lusaka was thirsty in Totem, he would just get a cup, open the tap, and go about his day without a single inconvenience. Lusaka got a few bottles to share with the young kids who were at the well, offered each one of them a bottle, but all of them refused to drink from them. Instead, one of the kids got a cup and drew from the bucket and drank from it. One kid said, "This is the mami water that is real," and she laughed with her friends. Upon further inquiring on why they thought that way, the kids explained that any clear liquid in a bottle was locally brewed beer similar to a colorless alcoholic spirit. Many relatives and friends came by their house to greet Lusaka, and each came with a different set of questions for him. Lusaka could tell that they each had many questions on their faces, so he sat around them to answer as many questions as possible while trying to put together a straight face without giving away much about the challenges he was having. People were interested in knowing what Totem Island was like, what food the people ate, how were the people, what it was like traveling in the enormous bird to get across the blue Mami water to get to the other island. For others who had no idea where Totem was, Lusaka used a map and a few pictures he had taken. He explained as much as he could. Soon it was time for breakfast with 2 sizable sweet potatoes, which were served with a cup of a traditional drink made from maize meal. Not wanting to seem so different, Lusaka did not open a single bottle of Mami water and joined everyone else drinking from the well. Soon after, he would experience the worst stomach upset, followed by heavy watery diarrhea. Among the people who came to the house was his uncle, whom Lusaka had never seen sober. He was either heavily hungover, drunk, or tipsy. The uncle was full of stories about Lusaka. Though he couldn't remember him, he had grown older, but alcohol abuse even made it worse on him. Every time he would start a story, he would ask, "Do you remember when I was getting married?" Lusaka would remember the events. "You and your cousin were sent to deliver a package to me," said the uncle and laughed. "You were a naughty kid," Lusaka's uncle said. In Lusaka's tradition, when a man is getting married, the wife's family prepares meals and asks kids like Lusaka to deliver the food. One Sunday afternoon, Lusaka and his cousin would be asked to deliver the food to his uncle from his in-laws. The latter lived about an hour of walk away. Lusaka and his cousin started well. Halfway along the way, the boys could not resist the food's excellent aroma, which made them curious about what was inside. They decided they would just open and see what was in there. "We're only looking," they told themselves, as they looked for a tree with the best shade to sit under and take some rest. Upon opening, they would find a full uncut chicken, dipped in thick soup, and another container full of nshima made from maize meal. For a second, the boys looked at each other, both of them salivating. It went from dipping in a finger, to taste the soup, to finishing the food, as they made up a story they would tell once they got home. "The food fell. Yes, that's a good one," they agreed and continued going. Everyone rushed to welcome the boys, who quickly explained that the food failed. But yet, someone would behead saying, "Bring the stick here." The boys left, surprised at what was happening. They later received a serious beating, only to discover that the oil on their lips gave everything away. After all the stories were done, Lusaka's cousin and childhood best friend said they would inspect the animal traps they had set up the night before in the nearby bush. Lusaka, still wanting to fit in, said he would accompany them. Along the way, the boys discussed how much fun it was to run through the bushes and how slow Lusaka was as a runner. The boys laughed as they remembered how many times Lusaka got stung by wasps, for he was always behind. Soon the boys started to inspect their traps. 3 out of 6 traps got something. Lusaka's cousin and the friend were excited about their catch, but Lusaka felt sorry for the little animals. Upon inspecting the traps, Lusaka saw a difference in how each animal died. The first 2 animals died without a fight, but he observed all the grass around the trap was gone upon inspecting the third one. He admired the fight the animal had put on before its death. After coming back from the bush, the first stop was visiting his old friends, which had less than 20 pupils when it first opened. Lusaka was one of the first pupils when the school had first opened. They did not have desks, books, or anything to say it was a school. Most of their classes used to be outside under a tree. Soon, they moved to use pencils and books after the 3rd grade and then used pens from the 5th grade. Lusaka would remember sitting and writing on the floor as a teacher would walk behind every child to ensure they got their mathematics right. The first 2 years were spent sitting on the floor. Lusaka's father would then donate the first 5 desks to the school, which Lusaka would share with 2 of his cousins and his friend. Later on, Lusaka's father, together with the community, would make 3 toilets just behind the school walls. The head teacher thought Lusaka was a great inspiration to the young students. He stood up and addressed them saying, "Dreams can come true if you believe in yourself and work hard. today we have the privilege of being joined by one of the first pupils and today taking the world by storm. Lusaka stood up nervously to address the students, thinking, "This is a lie. I have achieved nothing. I have nothing to account for." Looking at the students' faces, Lusaka noticed that the students did not care about what he said or his problems, but only hearing him speak was good enough. Lusaka said, "I would stand here and lie to you. I have come all this far by my doing, but to be honest," Lusaka said to the students, "there is something greater than us with a comprehensive plan for each one of us. Our only job is to find out what that is and have a belief in ourselves and our abilities. Thank you." There were a few developments at the school compared to when there was no Mami Water at the school. By this time, the school was over 20 years old and had grown to junior high. When the school was first opened, each student was given a tree to plant and look after the school project. Each student had to make sure his tree was well taken care of and had plenty of Mami Water. To Lusaka's surprise, these trees were still there. They had grown massively. Some of them uprooted because their roots started damaging the school buildings. Walking back to his classroom, a lot of memories would come to him. Gradually, the little voice came to Lusaka in his quietness. The voice reminded him that this is the place where everything began from. Imagining himself remaining before a talk theater with over 300 university students, Lusaka would feel lowered and fortunate. Before he could find the answers, the head teacher returned to the classroom as a way of making conversation. Lusaka would ask the teacher what were some of the challenges they were facing as a school. The head teacher explained many problems regarding the lack of teaching materials and resources, school supplies, mainly textbooks and books, to improve their reading skills. The head teacher clarified how the lack of Mami Water predominantly influenced students of age. He explained, "We have young ladies who take almost 7 days off school to take care of themselves at home. The schools had to be shut down in times of an infection breakout. We encourage each pupil to bring some Mami Water to wash their hands after using the toilet. We have had a lot of running stomach cases and a few outbreaks of Mami Water related diseases." This too has not changed, Lusaka thought for a second. Later on, Lusaka went to visit all the graveyards of his loved ones who had passed on. He started with his grandfather, who was buried just a few minutes walk from their house, then his 2 uncles who had also passed on. After which, he then visited many living relatives as he could, exploring the village once again like he did when he was young. The memories were still fresh, with many questions unanswered. Lusaka stopped asking "why me" questions. Instead, he started focusing his questions on how he can be a blessing to others, seeing how much he himself was blessed. As they prepared to leave the village after some time, he was left with only one task: finding answers to 2 questions about what he can do to help and why he was on the island. Lusaka was becoming increasingly frightened at the prospect of returning to Totem Island, as he was unsure if he would be allowed back into the system after his mistakes. The thought of it made him sick to his stomach, and with no one to share this with, it made it worse. During the visit, Lusaka decided to undergo a minor surgery, which is free in Kampanda, but required over 4,000 gold coins in Totem Island. The operation was supposed to be done when he was a baby, because the pain would have been minimal. Doing it 24 years later meant it would be the most painful thing he had ever experienced. Lusaka made an appointment at a local clinic that did it for free. They convinced him he would not feel any pain as the medicine was durable. Still without telling them he was traveling 2 days after, the day of the operation came. He was already hearing the voices of people crying in pain, which made him want to stop the process and just go back. But Lusaka knew it was now or never. He most definitely was not in any position to pay for it. The nurse came to collect him at the operating room, where he was injected with anesthetic and told him he would not feel a thing. After nearly 30 minutes, Lusaka had woken up from a deep sleep, feeling a sharp pain which he handled as the wound was stitched back together. Now screaming in pain like a baby and tearing up like young kids do, he was told by the nurse that the anesthetic drug he was given wore out before the operation was complete. After the surgery, the nurse recommended a 3 to 4 week bed rest and 2 follow-up appointments. Lusaka only had 2 days left, and he had to be active so that his parents did not find out anything. Otherwise, they would not let him fly. Chapter 10. The Flood. When we are teens, life seems so serene. All the love we speak. No fears, no tears. See, when trust is present, lessons make their presence felt. The essence of life rides within our minds. The day to leave came, and bags were packed, ready to go with over 60 fresh stitches from his operation and nervous about his travels. When he arrived, he had told them about the cleaning business he had started and how well it was going, so the parents had made him flyers to help him get more work. Lusaka knew he would experience the most uncomfortable trip ever, dealing with 2 things at once: the pain from the new operation and the anxiety of not being allowed back in. Lusaka wished if only he could be given another opportunity, yet knowing there was nothing he could do except to prepare for any outcome. Before starting off, his mother had packed 2 books in his traveling bag, which he overlooked. Finding it uncomfortable to sleep, Lusaka distracted himself from overthinking by looking at the trip's pictures. Reaching into his hand luggage, Lusaka saw the 2 books, Ichipingo, in parenthesis, the Book of Wisdom, close parenthesis, and another book without a proper cover and title. He was not in the mood to read and was in too much pain to concentrate. With nothing to do, he flipped through the pages with little attention to both books. 2 exciting lines caught his eyes as he flipped through the books. One of them came from the Ichipingo, which said something like, "The one who started the monumental work in you will see it finish." Without asking himself questions, he looked outside the plane window into the blue skies and came to an acknowledgement of that. There was something higher than him. The other sentence stood out more than the other texts, for it was printed in bigger and bolder colors than the rest, and it read, "There is greatness within you." He liked the words, but did not understand what that text meant or how it applied to his life. Lusaka was conflicted. He was looking forward to arrive early to get some painkillers, but on the other hand, was in fear of what was waiting for him upon arrival. A message from the captain, like the first time, got his attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, now we are approaching Totem Island where the local time is 3 p.m. Just as Lusaka was trying to make sense of it all. At this stage, be in your seat with your seatbelt firmly fastened. Personal television screens, footrests and seat belts must be stored away. All hand luggage is stored either in the overhead lockers or under the seat in front of you. Please ensure all electronic devices including laptop computers and computer games are turned off." With little anxiety, Lusaka was calm and collected. Shortly, he remembered his last time on the plane. He was nervous. He knew nothing about the island. Now he knows a lot more and is sure of what he wanted. He felt some sense of direction, especially with things Lusaka had seen on his trip and his responsibilities. A flight attendant who had noticed Lusaka limping up and down to the toilet asked him if he was okay, to which he said he was. She came back once again and asked if he needed a wheelchair. Lusaka agreed to the wheelchair. The wound had become infected and the stitches were not helping at all, and standing in long lines was going to bring more attention to himself. Upon arriving, he had to go through questions and check-in, which he did, and to his surprise, he did not have as much trouble as he thought. Coming out of the airport, he found Cairo and Lilongwe waiting for him. To his surprise, their faces were also surprised to see him. Still, they somehow decided to come. They then went to the doctor to look at the operation. They found that it had been severely infected. The doctor recommended 6 weeks of bed rest, which was too much time to waste, Lusaka thought to himself. His first and most important task was to get back to work and help Lilongwe run the business he left, but still could not. Lilongwe had done an excellent job and had continued the role with great passion. Lusaka was excited. All the clients were well looked after. For Lusaka, the cleaning business had turned into something else, something to serve a more significant cause and not just pay bills and eat lavishly. There was nothing else Lusaka would do apart from resting and waiting for the wound to heal. Sleeping was not in Lusaka's plans, as he had come with plans to expand the cleaning business. Lusaka wanted something for the cleaning business. The business involved construction site cleaning, which was more laborious than domestic cleaning, so he considered expanding their services to clean houses, offices, and commercial buildings. He had conversations with himself during the first 2 weeks of his resting period and decided he couldn't wait the 6 weeks for the wound to heal. He found a faster way to do it. Salt was one of the multi-purpose items they had in the village. It was used for many things, from cooking to washing wounds. It helped them dry, but it also was the most painful thing to do. After 3 days of cleaning with salt, mummy water started drying up, and 2 days later, he was at least able to do most of the things by himself. After many months of doing site cleaning and laboring, Lusaka had thoughts of reaching out to Milan, whom they had gotten comfortable with about his ideas of expanding the cleaning services. Milan welcomed the idea and asked them to do a handover cleaning, which they did for free. Milan, the company director, and the customer were all happy with the way Lusaka and his team did the job and promised they would be given more work. Still, for now, they would carry on with the labor work. A few weeks later, Milan would go for his annual leave and left Lusaka and his team in his senior supervisor's hands, the director's nephew. The new supervisor came in with his own way of doing things than how they worked with Milan. Judging from the first jobs he gave Lusaka and his team, Lusaka felt he was testing them. Telling Lilongwe, "I have a feeling this new guy will want to test us, to see if Milan's word was true, that we are really hardworking." So Lusaka and Lilongwe gave it all they had. As weeks went by, the jobs became more challenging and riskier, and everything seemed like he wanted to show the director that the boys were not as good as Milan had said. The jobs shifted from doing 3 site cleans to only 1. The first one was the hardest and the riskiest. It involved cleaning and taking off all the leftover bricks, sand, and cement. The third one only involved dusting so the customers would move in. The second one did not apply much if the first stage was done well. Once you leave the building, it was nearly impossible to see or know who did the other 2 cleans, which Lusaka had been negotiating for. One morning, the supervisor called Lusaka to move 6 pallets of paving bricks. The delivery truck could not reach the construction site, so the bricks were left on the side of a hilltop road. This task would be done quicker and faster with a forklift, Lusaka thought. Luckily, he had asked 5 of his friends to help him, so the boys took their time. That morning, Lusaka met the guy who cleaned the properties. Without saying much about himself, Lusaka started a conversation by asking the man a few questions. The guy explained his relationship with the supervisor. The way he spoke about the supervisor gave Lusaka the feeling that their relationship was strained. Lusaka listened and nodded his head as the man talked. He can't just go around telling people what to do, deciding who should work in the sun. The man frowned. "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean it like that." The man had given Lusaka a sign for his next move. "You guys are strong and good for hard labor." He meant it as a compliment. The man's statement bothered Lusaka, but looking at the jobs they were given, he knew that the people of Totem thought there was some truth to it. Weeks went by, and Lusaka asked the supervisor about changing their services to include more residential cleaning and less labor-intense jobs. A few days later, the supervisor called about an upcoming job. It involved moving 24 tons of sand up 3 two-story houses. The only way to move the sand was to fill buckets and walk up the staircase. This method was going to take days and would put their backs and health at risk. Lusaka tried to get hold of the supervisor and learned that he was at another site showing around the new cleaning team. "I just had to talk with him about that." Lusaka was frustrated, and he said that he would get back. Lusaka refused to complete the job and told the supervisor to pay his crew more and hire proper equipment. The supervisor was disappointed. He threatened to cancel their contract and withhold any owed payment because "my primary goal is to save money for the company," he stated. Lusaka looked the man in his eyes. If that is the case, then we choose to keep our health. During the time Lusaka was on bed rest, he thought of distributing the 300 business flyers he brought from Kampanda. Knowing the issue at hand, Lusaka took it upon himself to deliver all 300 flyers to building companies around the city. Lusaka stopped introducing himself as a business owner to avoid being looked at differently. He noticed that most people did not receive it with open hands when he mentioned it was his business. Yet, when Lusaka said that he worked for the cleaning company, everyone seemed comfortable dealing with him. After weeks of going door to door to introduce his business and being overly optimistic about the outcome, Lusaka still had not heard back from any businesses. Stress gradually set in, and Lusaka spiraled into his overthinking state of mind, trying to figure out why he hadn't heard back from even one of the 300 companies he visited. Still, the little voice within him assured him that something would come up. The little voice got Lusaka's attention, reminding him of what he had seen back home in Kampanda. He was responsible for his parents and siblings. He knew how important it was to make his business work and not to disappoint those who believed in him, like Cairo and Lilongwe. Lusaka felt frustrated and thought of giving up. You can become more persistent. Don't look in the mirror feeling sorry for yourself. Find one place to focus your energy. You can do it. The voice that had been guiding Lusaka returned. This time, he caved in. He had avoided the voice long enough. Lusaka researched companies that required cleaners. He decided to focus on one that managed 3 different brands. That morning, Lusaka prepared to visit the company's offices. Without an appointment, he drove to the company location. Knowing how impossible it was to speak to management without having a scheduled appointment, he sat in his car. It was a sweltering summer's day, and he could feel it in his forehead and palms, both wet from the heat. Lusaka doubted that the company could ever employ someone like him. He sat in the car with his confidence slowly dwindling. He took one look at himself in the mirror, started the car, and decided to head home. He drove away feeling like a failure and a coward. A few minutes after driving back, his phone rang. It was Cairo. He could not bring himself to answer the call. He felt shy, knowing she would instantly sense the low tone of his voice and ask questions he did not feel like answering. Cairo sent a message, checking up on him and wishing him well for the day. Lusaka stopped on the side of a busy freeway. The voice came again to him. You chickened out? Well done, once again. Lusaka felt mocked. He made up his mind and turned back. This was not about Lusaka. Everyone was to benefit from this. Lusaka arrived back at the offices. He entered just like everybody else, a customer and not someone looking to sell. He walked in slowly and looked around, trying to take in as many details of the place as possible. 3 women sat at the reception desk, too busy picking up the phone to notice people coming and going. He looked to the left, where a few different house designs were on display. Those are the ones I will be cleaning, he thought. He looked around, looking for more information to use to pitch his idea to reception. He listened in on a phone call the receptionist was on. It sounded like a customer was looking to pick a fight to the person in charge of their construction project. I think you might have to talk to Albany, our construction manager, the receptionist said calmly. I will get him to give you a call back since he's in a meeting at the moment. The small voice interjected Lusaka's thoughts. This is your opportunity. It's now or never. Lusaka approached the desk. Hi, he said, clearing his thought. I'm here to see Albany. I have an appointment with him regarding our cleaning services. Lusaka's heart was racing. I'm sorry, the receptionist replied. Albany is attending an emergency meeting at the moment. Please let him know you're here, she said as she looked around the table, handing Lusaka a yellow piece of paper on which to write his contact information in order to reschedule. For a moment, Lusaka felt like he was holding a winning lottery ticket. Lusaka drove home in disbelief. He felt like a champion, even though he had not achieved anything substantial yet. He did not reveal too much information to Cairo and his friends out of fear of giving them false hope. So he kept it to himself till he was sure that something would materialize from having Albany's number. Later that afternoon, Lusaka sat down and started drafting a message to send to Albany. He struggled to find the right words for a few minutes, and suddenly, a thought crossed his mind. Tell him what he wants to hear. Lusaka wrote the note. Dear Albany, my name is Lusaka, and I'm here to save you and the company a lot of money. I am offering you a service backed by excellence and hard work. Our team is more than happy to provide one free house cleaning for you. Then you can decide if we're suited for each other. Lusaka felt nervous. Offering a free service meant taking the risk of losing money, but he had to say it this way to get Albany's attention. He took a second look at what he wrote and hit the send button. That evening, Lusaka was excited as he imagined how he would feel if Albany got back saying yes. A few days with no response from Albany, Lusaka wondered what he had missed in the text. He decided to count his losses and plan his next move. One morning, Lusaka's phone rang. He glanced at it, trying to determine whether he should answer the call. Answering a call from an unknown number was risky when one had outstanding debts. He reminded himself that none of that mattered at the moment. Hello, the caller said. This is Albany. Am I talking to Lusaka? Lusaka quickly gathered himself. Yes, this is him. Apologies for the delay in getting back, Albany continued. When are you free to start the job? Tomorrow. Lusaka unconsciously responded, asking no further questions about the job. Lusaka broke the good news to Cairo and his friends, and they came together to pool funds for cleaning products. After Lusaka and Cairo completed the free job, Albany sent one of his supervisors to the property to assess the outcome. If the supervisor was happy, they could take over as cleaners for the 300 houses the company was about to construct. Tom notified Lusaka that he had sent 100 cleaning orders. This meant that Lusaka and Cairo would have to complete at least 3 to 4 homes a day. Even though the new venture would require more money and added expenses, Lusaka was overjoyed. This is better than having nothing. Their finances quickly picked up with the speed of orders, and things slowly changed. Lusaka and Cairo now had enough money to cover their expenses and help out the family. At the back of his mind, Lusaka knew that keeping Albany happy was the only way they could keep the job. One day, Albany called to Lusaka for a favor. He had people over at his house and wanted Lusaka to help him tidy up. Lusaka knew this was his lucky break. He had been looking for an opportunity to solidify the relationship. Lusaka was proud of himself for pushing the limits, putting his fear aside and walking into the builder's office without an appointment to see Albany, a man Lusaka could only identify by his voice. His favorite spot to sit on a hot summer afternoon was a mandarin tree. It provided the best shade from the hot sunlight and provided Lusaka a sanctuary after a long day at work. There, images of Lusaka's visit to Kampanda persistently flashed before him as he sat in silence under the tree. He refused to pay it any mind and continued scrolling through his phone. But despite his best efforts, the memories would not let up. His trip back home had changed something inside him. The way he thought of the world around him and his relation to it had shifted, but he did not know how to address it. This is too good to be true. It was the voice. Too good to be true, Lusaka grimaced. It's too good to be true, so it will not last long enough, the voice remarked. Lusaka recognized the voice. It's the one that warned him of any danger and had proven itself to him multiple times. He gave in to the words of the voice, and all the false evidence soon enough appeared real. Soon enough, Lusaka would remind himself of the other voice he did know well. Still, each time it intervened, Lusaka gained a new understanding of himself and his abilities. The voice had protected him, and in turn, he had learned to trust it. The most difficult battle was deciding between the voice he trusted and kept him safe, and the voice that pushed him out of his comfort zone and allowed him to reach his full potential. Chapter 11. The Ripening. Prowess, presence, power, passion, peace. Lilongwe had asked Lusaka to look at his car. It required a mechanic's attention, and Lusaka had become well known as a mechanic amongst his friends. He had always loved to help. He always thought it was good time for stories and advice sharing. He slid under the car as he was removing the oil filters. A memory of him snug under the hood of his father's car as a boy in the village crossed his mind. Lusaka chuckled at the memory. "Mama, boy," he said to Lilongwe, "I have gained weight. Look at how I struggled to get under here. When I was a kid, I used to do this like 1, 2, 3. Lilongwe had a way with one-liners. "Life is funny," he laughed. "Look at how far you've come." The following evening, as Lusaka sat out the mandarin tree, he remembered Lilongwe's statement the previous day. He sat in complete silence and watched the images of his childhood memories flash past him. The cold winter mornings on his grandfather's farm and the 2-bedroom hut he shared with his mother and extended family. The houses were built using homemade bricks and mud, and the roof was thatched with a mixture of grass and straw. The front door was often made of varying pieces of wood found around the house or given by family, neighbors, or friends. Curtains covered a hole for a makeshift window. On winter days, the hut's design flaws were thoroughly felt. A small fire would be left to burn out each night to keep the house warm and dry out cassava roots for flour. Lusaka's grandparents slept in the main bedroom on a homemade bed only 3 inches from the ground. Life at the family farm created some of Lusaka's fondest childhood memories. He remembered the early winter mornings with his cousins and how they often slept with only a thin blanket shared between them. To keep each other warm, they would snuggle up close until they finally drifted off to sleep. In the mornings, Lusaka's grandmother would wake them up at 6:30 a.m. sharp. Lusaka, being the eldest, was responsible for collecting mami water for the day's use. Lusaka opened his eyes, feeling as if he had been in a deep sleep. The memory of his childhood is still fresh in his mind. Time spent, lost in his thoughts, had taken him away from the real world, if only momentarily. He had drifted from himself, but now was not the time to think about that. He had to think about how to survive on Totem over the next few months. A dark cloud followed him around, blackening any sense of optimism he once felt. His phone beeped, alerting him of a missed call. He decided to return the call, hoping it was not something serious that he had missed. "Hi Lusaka," the voice answered. "The reason I was calling was to find out if you would be happy to come down to our site and have a look at some work we have. Are you interested?" Lusaka was surprised. "Yes, of course," Lusaka replied, trying not to sound too excited. The man provided Lusaka the address and thanked him for his time. "I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you." Lusaka was relieved. The man was calling on behalf of a construction company that had recently completed their first level of apartments and needed some cleaning done. Lusaka was overcome with confusion. He could not remember reaching out to the company before. That evening, he took Cairo for a drive without telling her where they were going. The apartment building was 12 stories high and overlooked a beautiful shoreline that Lusaka could not wait to experience from that height. At the front of the building stood a giant billboard depicting the building's completion. The selling price for a 1-bedroom apartment started at 500,000 gold coins. Lusaka was not surprised. He and Cairo often spent hours driving around wealthy suburbs in admiration of the architecture and splendor of the houses. It was something they loved doing together. To Cairo, this was just one of those days, but to Lusaka, it was a mission that would bring them closer to their future goals. The following day, Lusaka made his way to the appointment. He had done well to drive to the site the night before, but he still felt unprepared for the conversation he was to have with the man who called him. Unlike the previous day, everyone was present on site. The site was bustling. Workers moved in and out and up and down. He tried to keep a straight face. He did not want anyone to know that he had not worked on a project of such magnitude before. He reminded himself that it was just like any other job he had worked before, but his palms told a different story. He was sweating profusely, as if he had just stepped out of a sauna. Mainly because he had dressed up in his best suit, despite the fact that he was meeting at a construction site. Lusaka approached the site offices, where he found 2 men and a woman. They wore yellow safety vests instead of the green vests the other workers wore. He noticed their name tags said supervisor. "Hi, I have an appointment with the construction manager. Lusaka smiled. Okay, one of them replied. What's your name and what company are you from? My name is Lusaka. I'm from a cleaning company. The man quickly glanced at the book. Sorry, I can't see your name anyway, he said. Are you sure you have an appointment today? Yes, I am sure. Lusaka's heart was slowly sinking. This is log construction, right? Yes, it is, the lady replied, smiling. Let me try calling him. Lusaka reached for his phone. Are you looking for Newcastle? The lady inquired. I believe he's the one you're looking for. Follow me, he must be upstairs. Lusaka followed her as she led him up the stairs. He was grateful that she was in the office. Otherwise, he never would have made it past the other two guys. Newcastle, I have this gentleman here. I believe he has an appointment with you regarding cleaning services. Lusaka thanked her as she left and gathered his breath as he turned to Newcastle. Oh, hi. Lusaka, right? Newcastle said as he extended Lusaka his hand. Come with me. Newcastle was a big guy, nearly 7 feet tall. He towered over Lusaka, even for a guy who looked to be in his late 60s. He talked slowly and focused on every detail and requirement he wanted to be completed. As Newcastle and Lusaka walked around the floor from one apartment to another, he told Lusaka about the project. They needed the apartments to be cleaned and made available for buyers. This project is worth 32 million gold coins. We are constructing over 34 apartments, Newcastle explained. Lusaka prayed that he would be part of such an incredible project. Newcastle explained the work involved and asked Lusaka if his team would be ready to clean the display apartment before taking on the rest of the work. Lusaka agreed that it could be done. He would not let the opportunity pass him by. How did you hear about us? Lusaka asked Newcastle finally. He laughed. I saw one of your flyers in my mailbox about 4 months ago. I kept it in my file in case I needed any services. Lusaka instantly remembered. Newcastle was talking about the pamphlets he brought from Kampanda. This was the first and only call out of the 300 flyers he had dropped off to businesses and residents. Lusaka was humbled, knowing this was not because of his actions alone. It was a matter of divine intervention. He drove home in silence, completely lost in his thoughts. See, nothing is impossible with me. If only you'd get to know me better and trust me. The small voice appeared again. I promise to never leave your side. I promise to stand by your side until I have completed the excellent work I have started in you. Your only job is to see things as you would like them to be. After cleaning the first apartment, Lusaka received clearance from Newcastle and the construction supervisors. The following week, Lusaka, Cairo, Lilongwe, and the rest of the team were back to work. Lusaka was excited to see everyone back together. At lunch, they shared stories as they sat outside the balcony, overlooking the ocean and white sandy beach. This was the family he had away from home, each of them on their own journey. At that moment, all of Lusaka's woes seemed to disappear. That evening, Lusaka sat in bed, replaying the day's events in his mind. He felt a sense of elation, something that made him look forward to the next day. He thought of the small voice that he once considered a pain, a nuisance in the life of the young man still finding himself in this new world. Well done. Today was good. The voice brought a smile to Lusaka's face. You're good at this. Do more of it. Lusaka knew he had to acquaint himself with the voice. He needed to know who it was and why it cared so much. He counted all the instances he once considered dead ends that turned into some of his greatest achievements. It must be the voice, he thought. The voice heard and knew his every thought. It was up to Lusaka to understand it and trust it. You can only get to know me by getting to know me, it reminded Lusaka. I have a million ways of expressing myself. You can learn about me from anywhere, from anything, and from anyone. All you have to do is pay attention. Lusaka fondly remembered the words of his mother. She had told him something similar as a young boy in the village. Use your eyes and ears to learn, Lusaka's mother said gently as she pointed at each of the organs. Use your mouth to teach and be careful of what comes out of your mouth, for it only reveals the contents of your heart. What you say can build or break, so choose wisely. Lusaka realized that he had been following his mother's teachings all along, although he had not done so willfully. When he arrived on Totem Island, Lusaka knew that one of the greatest difficulties he would have to maneuver was his English language skill. It was spoken widely across the island, and he knew it determined one's success. He had learned to speak when spoken to and answer only necessary questions to save himself the embarrassment of speaking with a broken tongue. The voice said, "You can also seek me, but I can only visit you when you are alone. I am calm and collective. I am never excited or worried, and I like to see people who make their homes like that. To show me your seriousness, I want you to answer Freetown's questions," the same ones Lusaka had been running away from. Lusaka soon found that the English language was only a minor hurdle he had to cross in his time on the island. He was now further away from fulfilling his dream, the only reason he had come to Totem Island. Maybe I should just forget everything, he thought. Maybe it is time to pack up and go. Lusaka saw himself as a realistic person. I'm not trying to be negative. It is time to face the facts, he told himself. I am just looking out for myself. Lusaka noticed that every moment he spent asking himself tough questions was followed by worry and fear of the future. It was a heavy burden to carry. One day while they were polishing mirrors, Lilongwe and Lusaka were having a chat. They exchanged their worries about the future and where they saw themselves in 10 years. Without a formal education, Lusaka said confidently, no one will take you seriously, especially not on this island. Lilongwe refused. Many people have lived well-respected lives without a formal education. You only need to find the thing that sets you apart from those with formal education. Lusaka chuckled softly. Lilongwe had a way of finding a silver lining amongst a sea of dark clouds. Lusaka could not let go of the pain. What hurts the most is that I gave it my all. Is that all you came here for? The voice asked Lusaka. Look at your parents and the sacrifices they have made to invest in you. Returning to them empty-handed is not an option. There is more for you here. The voice recognized Lusaka's anguish and his constant comparison to those who appeared to be ahead of him. Without an education, there is nothing I can do, Lusaka replied to the voice. Unless I finish that, no one will ever take me seriously. Never mind being able to make a difference back home. Lusaka thought that he would feel some sense of normalcy once he received a cleaning contract from Newcastle. Things had improved. Lusaka could afford to pay his bills and buy all the clothes and material items he desired. But deep down, he felt incomplete. He felt that he was missing something that money could not give him. He remembered the 5 questions Freetown had asked him. Who are you? Where do you come from? Why are you here? What do you have to offer the world? And where are you going? He had to find some meaning as to why he had come all the way to Totem Island. One evening after work, Lusaka sat down to watch a wildlife documentary. It showed the early days of a newly hatched bird's life. The hatchlings lived on a mountain top overlooking Mamiwata. From there, they would take flight for the first time under the watchful eye of their parents. This was their introduction to survival in the wild. On the ground below, foxes scoured the grass area, ready to feast on the prey they found. Their pups followed their every move as they learned the art of survival. This was an exercise of life or death for the hatchlings. A fall to the ground meant a fox's dinner was sorted. One bird caught Lusaka's attention. It did not want to jump by itself and waited hesitantly for the other birds to go first. The chick's mother picked it up with its beak and took off. Once the mother reached flight, she let go of the bird, leaving it to fend for itself. At first, the chick headed straight towards the rock, but the wind forced it to open its wings as it tried to land. This is life, Lusaka thought. Sometimes you have to take the jump, whether you know how to fly or not. The chick almost made it to the Mamiwata below before it fell to the ground. The foxes see this, they run towards the chick, ready to feast. But the chick is not alone. The ocean current comes washing up the beach slowly, taking with it the stranded youngling. Moments later, the bird is floating safely in the Mamiwata. Lusaka recognizes a look of confusion on its face, like someone who had just regained consciousness after taking a punch to the head. I am on the cliff. Lusaka compared himself to the bird. At this moment, it felt like there was nothing more left. The voice was giving him 2 choices to pick from, and either could affect his future. Like that bird, Lusaka had to choose whether he was going to fly or perish. He kept alight in the desire to make real and lasting change in the lives of his family, the people in his community, and his own country. He had little understanding of the know-how and often contemplated giving up. There's nothing left for me here, but going back empty-handed is not an option. Those thoughts replayed in his mind constantly. In Lusaka's mind, the days of prosperity ended once the family business went under. Those were the good days. They were filled with the promise of a better tomorrow. The voice was listening attentively. There you go again. You are the master of self-pity. You're good at finding what you lack, and you excel at disregarding the lessons taught to you by your parents and mentors. Only the ones that fail to see the beauty of today say those were the good days. When Lusaka was in primary school, a boy in his class was hit by a bicycle while crossing the road. When news broke of the boy's passing, the teachers assembled all the pupils and taught them the importance of road and traffic safety through song. I want to cross the road, I want to cross the road. I look right, I look left, I want to cross the road. Lusaka considered the song for a moment. I have forgotten how to apply this principle to my life. I need to ask myself different questions and forget about the things I do not have. Lusaka had reached a breaking point in his business life. He began to feel underwhelmed and frustrated by the boredom and wondered whether something greater would eventually find him. Remember, the plans I have for you are not to fail, just to put your trust in me. The voice was persistent, much to Lusaka's dismay. It is easier said than done. I want to have a solid plan because I can no longer afford any risks or setbacks. I want to do it right, Lusaka explained to the voice. But in life, there is no plan that is 100% fail-proof. The journey I am offering you will be very uncomfortable. There is no finishing. You only finish when you take your last breath. Others will not understand it or like it. It will require you to spend a lot of time alone. What I need in return is for you to be teachable and be willing to challenge the unknown. Lusaka and his team were now working along the corridors of the third floor of the apartment building. This time, the team was rushing through one apartment unit to another, cleaning them from top to bottom. Like any other day, there were plenty of jokes and laughter around. Lusaka pulled out his headset to listen to music. This was a chance for him to have some alone time. Music warmed his soul and brought out unique energy. He enjoyed listening to musicians who spoke to him or told their stories through songs. He admired their courage and their use of their natural talents to bring something beautiful to the world. Their voices and sounds were all unique, and Lusaka marveled at their ability to cut through societal barriers of race and class. Many of them had come from impoverished backgrounds. This inspired Lusaka. He revered their talent, but constantly compared it to his own. He found that he lacked what he considered great talent. Although they were from similar backgrounds, the musicians had something Lusaka did not. On one visit back from the city, Lusaka's father bought his granddad a solar radio with only one tape, which they played back to back. They listened to the songs of a blind man who played the guitar. The musician was a self-proclaimed philosopher who was widely known as the Professor. Lusaka listened to him while cleaning the apartment when a random video started playing. It sounded like a person talking to a group of people, sharing his story of persistence to pursue his dream. Lusaka carried on doing his job without paying much attention as he scrubbed the toilet floors, getting rid of the paint marks. The speaker's name was Abuja. He shared a story of how he and his twin brother were left in an abandoned building at 9 weeks old by their parents. They were found by a kitchen worker and a maid who adopted the pair. Abuja encountered many challenges as a child, most involving his education. At a young age, he was placed into a special education class to help him fare better in school. Abuja became a janitor at a local radio station once he finished his high school education. Still, his dream had always been to perform his own music before a live audience. He explained that his family laughed and mocked his dream simply because they could not understand how one could go from janitorial work to being a well-known superstar. Abuja held on to his dream despite the naysayers. He created an imaginary radio station in his room. He used his hairbrush as a microphone, while he played records and spoke to the imaginary listeners. Because of his persistence and preparation, Abuja reached millions of people by sharing his story of overcoming adversity. He was only halfway through his story, but he had Lusaka's full attention. This man is speaking to me.